and welcome to Disinfo Nation. I'm Richard Metzger. On tonight's show, the man responsible for warping more minds of this generation than any other lone individual. He's wanted by the authorities for his frontal assault against reality and for various and sordid crimes against reason. Lock up your women. It's that charming genius of the comic world, Grant Morrison, tonight on Disinfo Nation.
I promised it was going to get wacky, and that shoe is about to drop. If there's anybody who deserves to be called the heir to William Burroughs, I think it's our next guest, the possessor of one of the most incredible imaginations on the planet. And we're very lucky to have him here as The Invisibles winds down to 2 last issues. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Grant Morrison.
Right. Fuck, man. I'll tell you, when I was a kid, I read Robert Anton Wilson and all this shit, and here we are, we're standing here, we're talking about this shit, and it's real. Okay, I'm pissed, and in half an hour I'm going to come up on drugs, so watch for it. I guess, I don't know, is there any practicing magicians in the audience? Put your hand up if we got any. Yeah, come on, bold. A few. Okay, by the time we finish this, you're all going to be practicing magicians. This shit's easy, right? I'm like you. Basically, why are we here, right? Why are we here at this thing? What's this all about? And by the way, this is a Scottish accent. So, reset the filters and pretend it's Sean Connery talking to you, okay? 007. Right. So if you can follow me, I'm just going to talk the way I talk, and fuck you if you don't understand me. The deal is this. I've been writing this comic for the last 6 years, and the weird thing was, like you, like everyone here, we're trying to figure what's going on. Why do we feel different? Why don't we fit into this world? Why do we think that they're not telling us the truth? So I went out and I read Robert Anton Wilson's books when I was 20 years old, which is 20 years ago now. And I figured, is this guy bullshitting me? He says we can talk to aliens, we can talk to people from Sirius. Is he talking crap? He said Aleister Crowley's got methods for contacting alien intelligence and for changing the world. Is he talking crap? So I did it. And no, he's not talking crap. Right? And we can all do it. And this is by way of trying to demolish the counterculture and replace it with something useful. We're just going to start here and see where we get to. When I started doing The Invisibles, which is a comic book for people who haven't seen the thing, it's a comic book which is kind of my attempt to explain what happened to me after I'd been abducted by aliens in Kathmandu in 1994. And the only reason I was abducted by aliens in Kathmandu in 1994 is because I went to Kathmandu in 1994 to be abducted by aliens. And it works, right? And these fuckers, they will turn up.
Dateline, Los Angeles, California. We tracked Grant Morrison, best-selling comics writer in the world, to his room at the trendy Standard Hotel on the Sunset Strip. It was here, against the glittery backdrop of a Hollywood dream factory, where this interrogation took place.
First off, what brings you to Los Angeles?
Well, basically the idea is to try and make some money, you know, because this is the place where bullshit turns into money. And that's an area of magic that's always interested me, the idea of just turning pure thought into pure cash. And this is the places where light becomes money. LA is a really weird place to be in. None of it connects. I mean, as you know, you're living here as well, but it doesn't add up. But it's interesting that way because it's all about illusion. Everything's a fake here, so I kind of like that, and I kind of want to get involved in it and see if I can profit from it.
What do you see right now as your relationship to what's being produced by the Hollywood culture machine?
I think what's happening is that, in my terms anyway, what I'm seeing is that ideas that were once marginal or that only I liked to play with 10 or 15 years ago in the comic books have become the mainstream of culture, and they've become the lifeblood of the movies and the TV and the records, everything we're watching and listening to. You know, there's Buffy on the TV, we get the Matrix in the cinema, Gnostic ideas are burgeoning everywhere, ideas about the supernatural, the occult, the power of magic, the disintegration of reality are all coming from this place. They've become mainstream and they've been fed back into our lives as the spectacle, you know, and it's the best spectacle we've ever had.
But why do you think these ideas have all these marginal ideas have become mainstreamed?
I think it has to happen, and even in the sense that we've all grown up to the point where we can now make them mainstream. And that's exactly what we seem to be doing. So we're selling weirdness back into the culture when the culture does demand it. The culture has come to us looking for ideas that once they would have hidden under a mossy stone and ignored. But suddenly, you know, things got boring. They ran out of heroic muscle men, they ran out of Rambos, they ran out of the entire Reagan, Thatcher-driven philosophy that we were all going on. And suddenly they've turned to the freaks and the weirdos and the outcasts and the geeks and the beatniks and the hippies and whoever's left to provide some infusion of interest into a flagging culture. And it seems to be working, and the interesting thing is that it's bending their culture towards our culture to the point where the two things are becoming interchangeable, and there's no difference between them, I think.
When you started The Invisibles in 1995, what was your intention? There was a very grand idea behind it.
Well, the comic had two starts. One was a false start where all I wanted to do was a kind of William Burroughs version of Jack Kirby's The Boy Commandos, because I thought it was such a cool name and DC owned the characters. I just thought, yeah, Boy Commandos, that just sounds like a Burroughs story. So it started out as this basic notion of psychic Boy Scouts, and you know, Baden-Powell was involved in it at one point. But it completely changed, and I decided, well, this was so far from the original that why should they own the title when I could just make something up? And I went through Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable and found The Invisibles. So that was it. The first 4 issues were kind of, knew what it was going to be, a boy's initiation into this occult secret society. Then in issue 2, I went to Kathmandu and had basically an alien abduction experience. And that changed the entire series, because what I then wanted to do with the series is to make something that was alive rather than just tell a story. I wanted to do something that was a spell that actually moved, that people who read it would be changed by it or would be led into situations whereby they might be changed. And also, ultimately, to simulate the experience that I had in Kathmandu, which I don't have any explanation for. And in The Invisibles, I went through every possible kind. I read Whitley Strieber, I read Philip K. Dick, I read everyone who'd reported this type of unusual experience. And the parameters are all the same. All the nervous systems report it slightly differently and use their own sci-fi language or theological language or mythological language, depending on who they are. But ultimately, the thing's the same, and it's like the shamanic process whereby you appear to be taken out of reality into a higher dimension. The body is stripped and destroyed, and then you're put back with extra knowledge, which then leads into weird synchronicities and unusual experiences that began to proliferate as the Invisibles was being written. So the whole thing, you know, I was living that comic as a diary as it was being written, and the occult stuff in it and the martial arts, that's all real stuff. It was as it was happening, it was going into the comic. So it's probably about 60% biography in there.
So I'm going to pry open that last answer a little bit here. First off, what happened to you in Kathmandu? What was the alien visitation experience like?
The short version is simply that I was sitting up on the roof garden in the Bajra Hotel, and this thing happened. And it's hard to describe, you know, we're getting into areas that are unusual. So all I can remember is getting back downstairs, and I lay on the bed, and kind of some unusual things happened, and then it seemed like there were entities in the room. It was like those silver morphine blobs you see in rave videos. You know, and it was like computer-generated things. And they claimed to be cross-sections of fifth-dimensional entities as expressed through four-dimensional space-time. And they claimed that I was one of them, and I had to come back and see what the old homestead was like. And that's when I felt like I'd been peeled off the surface of space-time. And they took me out of my body and into what seemed to be the fifth dimension, because I could see the entirety of space and time as a dynamic object in which Shakespeare was over here and I was over here and the dinosaurs were here, but we were all in the same object. And time was a thing. So I appeared to be in a fifth dimensional fluid, an information space that I could say was maybe kind of bluish, extending out infinitely. These things swam through it and interacted with it, and they told me that what the universe was a larval form of what they are, which is fifth dimensional entities. And the only way to grow a fifth dimensional entity is to plant it in time, henceforth our universe.
remember you were telling me this story once before, and you were saying it was like you could pick lint off of your sweater and then throw it up in the air, and it would surround you with a different kind of environment.
They were trying to describe how they make universes, and they said they can make them by detaching parts of their substance and plugging them into the surrounding fluid, the medium, the fifth dimensional information fluid that we were swimming through. And when you did that, when you plugged a fractal component of yourself into the universe, it would grow around you and become another one of these universes. And the idea was that those of us who knew, who'd had this experience, were supposedly midwives for this larva, because we remembered, and you'd go back and you're constantly trying to encourage the larva forward because it has to grow. I mean, it could die, it could just as easily die, but this one seemed to work, you know, I get the feeling this one works.
So it wasn't scary?
Not at all, no. It was monumental, it was soul-shaking, but it wasn't scary.
What was the next day like?
The next day was, what do you think? It was like, I was buzzing, I wrote like 200 pages in a notebook just to try and get it down.
Wow.
And then tried to explicate it for the next 6 years. And now I've, you know, I can just dismiss it.
Now you can turn it into a big Hollywood film and make a couple $1 million
Well,
off the script, you know? For people who haven't read the series out there in TV land,
Yeah.
how would you describe the book?
Well, I mean, the plot line is fairly labyrinthine and baroque, but basically what we have is the James Bonds of the counterculture, and these are super cool, 5 super cool terrorist, anarchist, occultists who operate in a cell as part of a vast organisation which may or may not exist, called the Invisibles, and which has existed since the dawn of time, to fight against tyranny and oppression and slavery and everything that's supposed to be bad in the world. So initially we set up this kind of conflict, the classic good and evil or freedom versus slavery conflict, where the Invisibles were on the side of, you know, love, laughs and libido basically. And the bad guys are on the side of, you know, George Bush and Margaret Thatcher and everyone who tries to run our lives and tell us what to do. And the Invisibles cell attempts to recruit this young kid from Liverpool who's a real violent punk. He doesn't even a punk, he wouldn't call himself a punk, he's just a kid off the streets of Liverpool who takes ecstasy and steals cars and does that sort of thing. But he happens to be, or he's believed to be, the Buddha for the future, the technological Buddha of the 21st century. And they have to recruit him before the other side recruits him and uses him to hasten the apocalypse. And that was our plotline, and through that, you know, there's lots of other things come into it. There's a time travel thing that goes on in there. The whole thing loops through time. There's an object that connects all the characters through time. We have like previous Invisibles groups in 1924 who do things which connect and vibrate through the ether that, you know, turn up to be important in the present day, or things that go backwards through time. So the whole thing kind of, it exists in its own little continuum, and it has its beginning and end, but it's also meant to intersect with the real world, and there are parts of, you know, things that happen in the real world go instantly into the comic, like the death of Diana, or, you know, like the fact that surveillance cameras were going up all over Britain, and everything tied in so beautifully to the dynamic of it. But ultimately what happens in the comic is that that plotline or that setup is subjected to such rigorous destruction that something else emerges by the end, which I don't want to say too much to people who haven't read it yet, but it is, we're taking the classic good and evil conflict, or anarchy v repression conflict, and trying to resolve it into something at the end. So, yeah, I mean, the setup is pretty high concept, but I think the philosophy is more important than the plot in the book. Punk rock, dude. This is a Donna Karan suit. Fuck it. So leading on from these ridiculous, where do you go from that? I found out that if you do these things that you're told by Aleister Crowley, by Wilson, by all these people we read and all these people we've been consuming, but we don't do it, if you actually do what they say, things happen. Things occur exactly as it's described, and we can all do it. So I decided to put this to use in the comic book that I was doing, this thing called The Invisibles. And the idea was to kind of get all this down on paper and somehow look at it, not to accept it as reality, to accept it as purely this is part of human experience. It's a part of human experience that has been described to us for thousands and thousands of years, but for the last 200 has been hidden and made occult for some reason that I don't understand, but seems to have to do with the Industrial Revolution and corporate culture. So these things happen. Magic works. And when I started doing the comic, I found that you could actually make magic happen by writing things and changing the operating system of the universe. It works, and I'm here to tell you to try it when you go home tonight, because it fucking works. And what happens if we all do it? Everyone in this room decides to take control of reality. I'm talking about reality. I'm talking about quantum physics. I'm talking about taking control of things from the quantum level up, from the molecular level up, and it works. This magic works. So I'll tell you something you can do while I'm here. One of the best techniques and one of the easiest techniques to prove that this thing works is to practice sigil magic. First thing you do, write down a desire. Make it something easy that is likely to happen, something possible, rather than say, you know, I'm going to be king of the moon, which you may want to be, as we all do, but it's kind of hard. To be king of the moon, you're going to have to get a rocket and go up there. So pick something easy. If you want to sigilize for a lottery win, make sure you buy a ticket, or else it won't work. So these are the conditions within the material universe that we live in. What I think is we're actually dealing with is some kind of operating system that can be hacked using words. And words seem to be the binding agent for this thing, whatever it is. So around about 1997, I decided I would really seriously turn the thing into a super sigil. And it was based on the idea of, if you look at cave art, the first writing was done basically as art. And if someone wanted to make something happen, like if you were some like fucked up caveman in a cave somewhere moaning about your dinner, what do? You draw a bison on the wall, stick some spears in it, go out, and the bison dies filled with spears. And hey man, we can make this happen. Slowly those things become letters, they become words, they become reduced to abstractions, complexes of meaning. And you can take that basic idea, people like Austin Osman Spare, the magician from the early part of the century, or Crowley, or the Chaos magicians from the 80s, who were a big inspiration on me. They used this stuff. And what you can do is this, like I say, try this at home. Write down a desire. Quite simple, say, it is my desire that my cat wins the Olympics. Take out all the vowels. Right? Write this down, for fuck's sake, and do it. Don't just listen, do it, right? Take out the vowels, and you'll be left with a string of consonants. Take out the repeated consonants, and you'll be left with a string of consonants that have no repeats in it, whatever, X, Y, A, D, whatever. Turn that thing into a little image. Take the D, draw a big D, then you've got a T, draw a T under it, and keep reducing it down until it looks magical. And there are no rules for this thing. Do it until it looks magical. At that point, you now have a sigil. The sigil will work. You can project desire into reality and change reality. It works. This is verifiable. People have been telling us about this for thousands of years. The Tibetans have been telling us about this. The Mesopotamians have been telling us about this. And why has it been made occult? Because Coca-Cola have got the secret. These people know what we're talking about here, because what you do is you create a sigil. Coca-Cola is a sigil. The McDonald's M is a sigil. These people are basically turning the world into themselves using sigils. And if we don't reverse that process and turn the world into us using sigils, we're going to be living in fucking McDonald's. Magic is accessible to everyone. The means of altering reality is accessible to everyone. And when everyone starts doing it, we're going to get to see desire manifest on a gigantic scale. Everyone's desire. What happens when everyone's desire becomes manifest?
Just down the street from LA's trendy Melrose Avenue sits a remarkable cafe-cum-art gallery called Nova Express, where artist Howard Hollis displays his obsessive masterpiece, The Picture. The picture looks a lot like the Sgt. Pepper's album cover combined with a super complicated Where's Waldo. Think of a cartoon character or pop culture celebrity. chances are that no matter how obscure the character that you are looking for might be, if you look hard enough, you will find them in the picture.
What is it that you're trying to communicate to the human race with the picture?
Oh boy, I don't really know specifically if I have any real message to communicate with people. This piece was more my own obsession. It started with this picture of Spider-Man over here, and I said, what about doing all of the superheroes in one piece from all of the different comic book companies? And then I figured, well, some superheroes are also cartoons, like Blue Falcon and Dynamite. So I'm like, what about all the cartoon characters? So I started adding cartoon characters to this. And then I thought, well, what about giant robots? And then I thought, well, some cartoon characters are also rock stars, like the Beatles. So do I put all the rock musicians in? And then I thought, well, what about celebrities? And if I'm doing celebrities, then why not friends of mine and my family? And why not religious iconography? And then I thought, oh boy, this is going to be quite an undertaking. And it took me quite a few years to complete. I kept making lists of different things I wanted to add and just put everything together in one piece. I have the Brady Bunch playing Hollywood Squares, the Munsters versus the Addams Family on Family Feud, hosted by Elvira. I have Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard up here. This is an MC Escher in an Etch-a-Sketch, and the dogs playing poker. We have a few countercultural characters making their way up here on the top. I have Marilyn Manson and David Bowie. I have Timothy Leary and Genesis George and Robert Anton Wilson. The Avengers Mansion and the X-Men Mansion. There's a couple of characters in here from Grant Morrison's Invisibles. Grant, if you're watching this, you rock, man. In this little television here, I have an idea for a television show that I would love to see happen, although it probably would never happen, where Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls are condemned to spend the rest of eternity on this tiny little one palm tree island, and the only people that can communicate with them are Puff Daddy and Lil' Kim, who appear as these giant heads in the clouds. So this is just a TV idea that I threw into the piece. So.
I'm wondering, what is the ultimate message that you want the viewer of the picture to come away with?
I'm not really one for minimalist art experiences, although I appreciate that. I like people to look at this piece and see there's a connection between all things, and that putting them all together in this one piece makes people see the individual things sort of differently. That's a good, important thing for me, to have people lose themselves within the picture and find something that they can relate with and say, oh, I remember that guy, or boy, I wonder if this person is in there, and then they go looking for that. And it takes them on a journey, and it's almost like they can lose themselves within the imagery. That's what I'm really going for here. I mean, more than a profound statement, just an enjoyable viewing experience. Someone to come and appreciate that there's all of these elements in there and to search them out, or search out the ones they want to find. And to find them, that would be a really great thing.
People get streamed, and I actually believe that there's a lot more hierarchical caste system goes on in their culture than we think. In the sense that why are there always policemen? Why is there never a century where no policemen get born? You know, it's like we always stream just enough people into these roles, and suddenly we're filling the roles that once Timothy Leary or William Burroughs filled. Well, yeah, we get born and suddenly we're streamed into those ones, and there'll be kids right behind us who do it. So all we can ever hope to be is some kind of leading edge of oddball ideas that refresh the culture behind us, because we're always a little bit ahead of what's popular and what's fashionable. And that's why it seems cool, because it's a little bit ahead and it's a little bit hard to understand. But ultimately it gets swept up. You know, the Matrix is the mainstream. So those ideas that to me were very unusual and abstruse back in 1994 are now the vocabulary of every kid who can afford to go and see a movie.